We are very, very motivated to go about doing what it is that we do, giving a platform to aspiring and interesting musicians from a tiny little church in the west of Ireland, and you can turn it on in Norway. But I remember when Molly was small, we couldn't get people to come in and sit down. They were saying, who's playing in there? We don't know any of them.
That's unimaginable now. I mean, having been the queues of people, no one can get tickets, everyone wants to go. So it really began very modestly. Performing in the church, it's so unique for the artist as well.
They have to walk up a step ladder through a window that opens. And there is only one way in.
Well, Amy Winehouse went up those steps, and with her little spindly legs in her beehive.
Yeah. Everyone kind of comes in the same way, no matter where they are. And I think they feel that any business grows. Sometimes it's easy to forget what made it important. And I think it was important for us to every once in a while say, why is this so important? And
so, Molly, you were sort of growing up with this, so you remember it when there was hardly anyone in the church. How did it suddenly become sort of such a destination? Welcome to All About Business with me, James Reed, the podcast that covers everything about business, management, and leadership. Every episode, I sit down with different guests of bootstrap companies, masterminded investment models who built a business empire. They're leaders in their field, and they're here to give you top insights and actionable advice so that you can apply their ideas to your own career or business venture. With consumers now bombarded with content, cutting through the noise is harder than ever. Without an engaging brand that speaks to a clear audience, your business will get ignored. So how can you make sure your brand stands out and holds people's attention while staying true to your vision? Joining me today on All About Business are Molly and Philip King. Philip and his wife Nuala O'Connor started Ireland's OtherVoices festival at a tiny church in Dingle. Now, 2 decades later, their daughter Molly is head of development, and the festival has millions of viewers every year. It's hosted some of the biggest names in music, including Kate Tempest, Arlo and Amy Winehouse. Despite its success, the festival returns to that very same church in Dingle every year, while broadcasting to viewers across the world, which makes Molly and Philip the perfect guests to talk to us about building an authentic brand with millions of followers. Molly, Philip, thank you so much for joining me today. You're our first double act on All About Business, and I should explain to our listeners and viewers, that's because you're a family business. We've got 2 generations of kings on the sofa this afternoon. What's it like working as a
family,
if that's the right way of saying it? Molly, you kick us off there.
I think it's always been that way, so it doesn't feel like anything other than completely normal to me. I don't know, you might be back there. But
I feel I've put you on the spot somewhat. But yeah, so you've always worked together. For you, I suppose,
for me,
growing up in the family, that's been...
So my dad Philip and my mother Nuala, they run a production company. And so they've made a lot of films, run events, and me and my 2 sisters were always around that in some way, shape or form. So brought to sets, brought to studios, musicians in the house. It was fantastic upbringing. So I was always very taken with that. It was magnetic for me. So I did my level best to become like a professional hanger-on.
Right, you really wanted to join
this. I just tailed Dad around and I got him to agree on multiple occasions to take me out of school to go and make documentaries when I was, 10, 11? So maybe not great for the Department of Education, but great for me. And I've just been doing that ever since, in different capacities. But I mean, obviously Philip will have a different perspective. But for me, the world that he was inhabiting was so attractive to me in terms of how social it was, the creativity around it, the excitement around it, the kind of teamwork element. And I just wanted to be there all the time. And so I kind of felt quite sure that I would make my way back there at some point.
So what about you, Philip? What's your perspective on this? I think it's wonderful to work together in this way.
Well, I think it's absolutely wonderful to work together in this family way. It seemed very natural, as Molly said. Nuala and myself had been involved from very, very early on in our lives with music, art, culture, and capturing that and capturing a sense of our own country, what Ireland was like, and seeing it through the lens of culture.
Well, the universal language of music. I mean, everyone, I think, loves music of some sort or another, and it certainly is a great unifier and brings people together. So you've created this wonderful festival. Molly's already referred to it, OtherVoices, and you run this together as a family. Could you just describe it to our listeners? You tell us a little bit about the place, the people. Why did you do it, and what is it? The OtherVoices.
Well, where we live, if you can close your eyes and imagine it, and I often do this on the radio program, I'm sitting at home on the most westerly tip of the Dingle Peninsula, right at the edge of Europe. And, I think John F. Kennedy, when he visited Galway, said, if the day were clear enough and your eyes were strong enough and you were looking west, you would see Boston, Massachusetts. So if you stood on the top of, and you know this mountain very well, of Mount Eagle, and you looked out west, the next landmass after the Blasket Islands is America. So if you can imagine this place, it is Irish speaking, which is hugely important because it is a cultural repository, if you like. It is a cultural resource in the place. The musicians play to put the rhythm under the dancer's foot. People speak the language clearly and beautifully still, even though it is weak and, I would say, in some sort of danger. But
the thing that attracted Nuala and myself to this place was that I speak the language. It was the culture that drew me there and brought me there and keeps me there, really. The topography of the place is very beautiful. It's wild and windswept in winter. And naturally, when we were setting up our business, when we moved from Dublin with the triplets, we said, well, what are we going to do now? Right, in this place, we said the
good question.
So it's a really good question. And I'd say
fishing.
I'd say all of the business people listening would say, "God, your man's mad. What's he doing in this wild, wonderful place?" But how would you set up a business? So there was this little church, and again, if you can imagine the main street of a small town in the west of Ireland, was an old Church of Ireland, and there were some bits and pieces of music happening in the church from time to time. And one thing led to another. And as I said, we were in the era of the dial-up telephone. Myself and Glenn Hansard, a musician that many of you might know, and some others made a list. And we made a list of musicians that we thought we could invite to come to West Kerry. And this doesn't sound like a sort of great business idea yet, So
go on, keep going. I'm all ears.
So we invited a whole load of musicians to come, and they came and they played. And so where do we get the money to do this? I rang RTE again, the public service broadcaster in Ireland, and I said, "Can you give me some money? I want to take a photograph and film these things." And and they said, "You've been very successful doing other things, but maybe we've no money this year." And then I got a phone call on about the 5th of November from a guy that I knew and said, "We found a bit of money down the back of the sofa that we have to spend before Christmas, and you can have it." So they gave us this little lump of money, and this television series, as it was born in this place. And in the 23 years that have elapsed since, it has grown to what it is today. But I remember when Molly was small, going up and down the main street of Dingle saying, come in, sit down. We couldn't get people to come in and sit down. They were saying, "Who's playing in there?" We don't know any of them. We don't know any of them.
It took quite a few years.
Quite a few years. No. So, this
That's unimaginable now. I mean, having been the queues of people, no one can get tickets, everyone wants to go. So it really began very modestly.
Very
as
modestly.
Most things do, I guess.
And very simply. And I think in the work that we do, privileged to be around some remarkably creative people who create intellectual property, and that's a business in itself. But to go back to the core element of the piece itself, it's dealing what it feels like to be alive. What sort of solace and succor and motivation do you need to get up every day and to go to work and to go about your daily life? And I think what the culture piece does is it gives people that sensibility. And I would say that it's more important now than ever, as the world has become a little bit more virtual, a little bit more augmented, and a little bit more artificial, that when we find ourselves in the company of people where it's tactile, tangible, and visceral, that is a different quality. And I think trying to balance out the loneliness, let's say, of a digital life with the warmth of the real tactile, tangible thing is a fantastic thing. And I think that that's what people need to get them up in the morning and to give them the sense of purpose to go about what it is that they do.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, listening to you both, really. This is your family purpose, isn't it? To bring that to people. Is that fair? I mean, you do this together.
Yes, we are doing that together. And Molly has learned a complete skill set in terms of what is needed to go about doing that. So you might say, well, what is it that you do? And again, I'll refer to Nuala, who's the brains of the operation, really. Truly. And
so where's that leave you to then?
We are humble in our
we're humble and we listen very carefully.
Right.
But as you were saying, like somebody asked Nuala once, what is it that you do? So if you said to us, what do you do?
Well, good question.
And what Nuala said very succinctly was, we celebrate what's about to happen and we capture what's about to disappear. And I would say that is the core mission of what the South Wind Blows enterprise is about. And it can only happen if you win trust. And I think many relationships are predicated on that trust, that the artist trusts you. So when we've worked with a litany of various different people, like whether it's U2 or Elvis Costello, or whether it's an unknown traditional musician, and almost more importantly, if it's somebody who's sort of unknown to the public, that they trust you and they invite you into their home and they sit at the kitchen table and they take out an instrument and they begin to play. The privilege of that exchange and the trust that's inherent in allowing somebody to capture that, to film that, to photograph that, and to hold it in store is hugely, hugely important. So in our work, that piece is the sine qua non, really, of enabling us to do what we do. In the large scale of things, I guess, what I'm saying is that the privilege to be doing this work and to enter that world of relationship, trusting relationship, and to photograph the artistic life of a country, which is what we've been doing for 30 years and more, is the heart of the matter.
We're delighted that you're watching this episode. Please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to receive more insights and actionable advice that will help your business and/or career.
So I can hear the passion and conviction about what you do and your love for that. But how do you divide responsibilities, as a family enterprise? What's your focus, Molly, and then yours, Philip, primarily?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my title is head of development. So I develop all new projects, and then I suppose specifically OtherVoices, this festival and TV show that we do. I would have been responsible for the rebrand of it, the aesthetic of it, bringing in sponsors, partners, developing it in terms of how big it is musically, how many shows we have. At a certain point, we had reached kind of a large capacity in terms of people were coming down, and I felt kind of frustrated that the branding, the logo, the aesthetic of OtherVoices, I felt it didn't necessarily match with the experience that everyone was having on the ground. I didn't feel it was very contemporary. I didn't think it expressed who we were. So then I started annoying Dad about this around the dinner table.
So was he the creator of the less contemporary version?
No, I don't even know who the creator. It was more like we didn't have a creator of it.
Must have come from somewhere.
There is a poster of one of our old events that I dig up sometimes to.
Brands evolve. I mean, that's okay.
Yeah. And I say, this is what it used to look like. And it's kind of like clip art. Like, I don't know who made it. So there was, in a way, it was more like trying to get people to understand in the company that what you look like, particularly on social media or on television or on YouTube, is crucial to how you are perceived. And it sounds maybe slightly superficial, but it's not. And so we did it. We kind of sat down and I spent months thinking about rebranding and, convincing mum and dad to let me do it. And then I convinced them to let us rebrand South and Blows' logo, which I used to hate. And now I love. But it was it was more just that they were taken up with producing films, directing films, writing them, putting on events. And it wasn't as if they were dismissive of it. It just hadn't necessarily occurred to you, I don't think.
When did you do this?
This was maybe 10 years ago.
No.
I was in my early 20s.
So you were ahead of your time, really, in recognizing this need for digital.
I think so. I
suppose. We've talked to other people on the podcast about digital first, but you will recognize that a decade ago. Huh?
Yes, maybe it was useful because I'd been around for so long and I was quite young at the time. So I was just naturally engaged with digital media constantly as a music fan, as someone in their early 20s. So I could see where it was going and I could see what I wanted from it, from my generation.
One of the things I think is a secret advantage of family businesses is that they can immediately tap into the young generation. Philip and Nuala, with you there.
I mean, I agree entirely.
A lot of businesses don't have that. I mean, so what's your take on all this?
Well, hugely enriching, to have somebody who is growing into the business, but who has a whole skill set and means of communication and an understanding of the technology. I'm an analog guy of a certain age who grew up with a dial-up telephone, didn't have, a mobile phone, etc. Whereas Molly grew up in a generation of a different sort of digital generation, so was able to bring all of that to the company. So for us, it was hugely, hugely enriching and, hugely successful as well, because people began to sort of sense what OtherVoices was about in a different way for a different generation. I mean, when I started making television programs first, and you'll know from having worked at the BBC, and that going about making television programs then was a completely different matter to what it is now. I mean, some things remain the same. A good idea, having a great idea. How do you develop the idea? How do you get the resources that are necessary to go from the abstract idea to the tangible thing on the screen? But as you say, working with the family. And so I suppose the little business that is Southwind Blows grew from that passion. And I guess in any business, that's hugely important, to have a belief and a passion in the thing itself for its own sake. And, I think that without that, businesses will always struggle.
My father's always said that success is as easy as pie.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what's that mean? Pie.
Right.
And he said, P for passion, I for ideas, and E for energy.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of this from both of you.
Well,
passion, ideas, and energy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think without that, I think a business will struggle. And particularly, a family business, I mean, I think the passion is definitely there. The idea that we want to go and do it is definitely there. And we're energetic about it. And I'll go back to Heaney's phrase again, motive force. We're very, very motivated to go about doing what it is that we do. And to go back to the first principles, or Nuala's first principle, celebrating what's about to happen, giving a platform to aspiring and interesting musicians, and giving a platform to them that they can speak to the world eloquently and clearly and beautifully from a tiny little church in the west of Ireland, and you can turn it on in Norway, and there it is. Without the quality that's in the place itself, we wouldn't flourish. The business would not have survived or endured and grown in the way that it has, because it's that sort of almost abstract thing, the thing that you can't put your finger on.
That's almost if you're starting something
Yes.
fresh, it's almost what you need to find, isn't it? Somehow the thing you can't put your finger
But
on.
incredibly elusive, isn't it?
Well, it seems to be, yeah, and you did. So Molly, you were sort of growing up with this, so you remember it when there was hardly anyone in the church.
Yeah. So
What's your recollection of what happened? How did it suddenly become sort of such a destination? What's your take on that?
a few things happened. We started putting on all these shows. More people came naturally. And I suppose after a certain period, I just remember that my touchstone was that my friends started to care about it, which took years. It took years for anyone.
They were slow to wake up to this.
Or anyone in school, like
Yeah.
peers, by the time we were about 13 or 14, it started to become a thing that people paid attention to, or they'd be like, oh, who's playing? Can we go and see something? And then I started to be like, oh, this is becoming, people are starting to notice this. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And by the time I got to university, every once in a while, someone would say, oh, OtherVoices, I know that. And I can't put my finger on how to answer your question. Some of it was just a natural progression. And as Philip's aptly described, like the magnetic nature of Dingle in this off-season time, I think it was kind of key that it was winter time that we ran. And it also became a kind of an unofficial music industry Christmas. The entire Irish music industry decamped to Dingle for a weekend every December and had a ball. And I think some of them are a bit annoyed now.
Location, timing, artists. There's a lot going on here.
I think some of them are a bit annoyed now that it's gotten so big.
It's harder to get in.
It's harder to get in. You can't get your favorite spot in the pub anymore. Not necessarily, but yeah, some of it grew naturally, and then I think we started to sit down and think, what do we want to do with this? There's a sense of momentum to something that you don't always have control over.
Yes.
And then you almost have to sit down and think, okay, the ball is rolling down the hill, and how do we maintain and retain the ethos? So you'll understand this, with anything, any business grows. Sometimes it's easy to forget what made it important, or what was the core. And if you don't hold on to the core, then you might lose sense of what the gig is, and you might turn around and go, oh, we didn't really mean to do that. And I think it was important for us to every once in a while say, what are we doing here? Why is this so important? And it goes back to the artists. Without the artists, we don't have a show. We don't have anything without the music. So if you never lose sight of protecting the music and the artists, and making sure it's a good experience for them. And I think if you always know that, as big as you get, or how many events you put on in different locations, you'll hopefully be able to always kind of like keep the ethos the same, so that people, no matter what location we pop up in, people might say, oh, that's OtherVoices, so it'll be like this. It will sound good. It'll be intimate. It'll hopefully be in some way emotional. I'll see some really good music. The bands will be happy. And then I'm going to be able to go and look at it all on YouTube. And then I'm going to be able to go and look at it on telly. And then I'm going to be able to send it to my pal who lives in San Francisco, or my pal who lives in Norway. And it's allowing the audience to always feel that they will get the same quality experience in terms of production value, but also in terms of emotion. Because obviously we say this jokingly, but it is true that we are in the feelings business. Like, that's our business. But we're in the feeling business because music is inherently emotional in terms of how people interact with it, but also we're family and it is personal. It's not just a business to us. It's the way we live. It's what we do every day. And it's hard to imagine doing anything else. Like, you've really spoiled me for another job.
Well, you don't have
So I
to.
hope I don't
You
ever
keep
have to
going.
get
I would
another
hope,
one.
I hope you keep going. Yeah. So this is obviously, you described it very eloquently. You've sort of kept a sort of core to your offering, which has been consistent, but it's grown because of this digital opportunity that happened at the same time, in parallel really to when you started all those years ago. And you've done that sort of very successfully, sort of taking it out to the world now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess obviously the pandemic happened, and everyone had to go digital, and we were very lucky that we already knew how to do that, and so
Yes,
I suppose that accelerated what we were already doing to a very significant degree. So that's when
the
live
COVID thing
streaming
was
came.
a big learning curve for us
Yeah.
as well, because again, it was interesting. The government contacted us and said, lots of businesses are going to close. It's going to be great difficulty, as we all experienced. And it said for artists and for the music business, this is going to be real trouble. Nobody's going to be buying a ticket to go and see a show. And they said, you have some expertise in this area of streaming things. And so, I mean, we were very lucky because the government had some resources and gave us some resources to go about doing something. And they said, what do you think we should do? And we hit on the word courage and said, what people are going to need now as they're isolated one from the other is some courage. And I used that phrase a little earlier on. How do we collapse distance at a time of isolation and bring something to people? And so we suggested that we would do a series called OtherVoices, Courage. And we did 19 of them. And it was remarkable in a way. We got access to buildings that in 100 years you couldn't get access to, like the National Gallery in Dublin. A beautiful room, the Shaw Room, beautiful iconic paintings in the room. So you put a rapper from Limerick called Denise Chila in the middle of this room and do it live, not as live. And it was sensational. And so we took Fontaine.
So this is in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, we did 19 of these, and we put Fontaine's DC into Kilmainham Jail and did it live. And people were ringing up and saying, this can't be live, it's live. And so we then hit upon the notion in the collapsing distance business that if a presenter or the artist would actually say, hello, there are messages coming into us now from San Francisco, from Australia, from Austin in Texas, from London, and send us some photographs. And there are pictures of people dancing in their kitchen. And so during the COVID piece, this was a real boon. For the artists as well, who got to go to work. But also then we were able to break down the distance and bring people together and give people a sensation of almost virtually being at an event. So we did 19 of those in 19 amazing sort of places around the country. And it was amazing. The bureaucracy of getting into these places just fell away. And the minute that COVID was open, you'd say, can we do a gig in the National Library? He said, you must be out of your mind.
Yeah,
He said,
that was
we
a
couldn't
one-time
allow
thing.
anything like that happen in here. So we were back to
You took your opportunity.
we were back to sort of like dealing with process. And one of my pet things is just process is choking everything right now. I mean, the level of process, I mean, from the Arts Council to everywhere, is the enemy of creativity, really. But I mean, that's just
I think that's a very interesting observation that I would share with you.
And aside,
although we're in very different businesses, I see that myself.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that the core thing, I mean, in your business, the core business is work. Wanting to go to work, providing work. How do you get a job? How do you place somebody in a job? How do you get the right person? All of those things are absolutely crucial and attendant to everything that we do.
It's a difficult business in terms of it's, challenging to keep going, to get your budgets, to find partners and sponsors and work with getting grants. And, any peers and friends that I have in the music industry, a lot of us go, God, why do we do this? And then you get to the weekend of your event and then you go, oh, well, I know why we do this. This is special. But I think having grown up around all the good parts and the challenging parts as well, being very aware that there are elements to any business like this that are challenging, is, I guess, being able to kind of keep your hand on the fire in terms of sometimes you'll have difficult years, sometimes you'll have great years, but you keep going because you love
That's your
it.
message. Keep going.
Yeah, you just have to kind of keep.
And you nearly die several times,
Yeah.
And
That's true of our business too.
Yeah,
Still going.
yeah.
64 years. We've had some war stories.
Yeah, everyone has a few war stories. That's part of business.
Here's a suggestion. I think you'd really enjoy listening to Other Voices this year. It's live in Dingle between the 29th of November and the 1st of December. You can find Other Voices on YouTube. There are some fantastic acts that are going to be playing this year, and I'm looking forward to being there in person. But join online, you'll love it.
Well, I mean, in the very beginning, James, we made a list of artists, and probably nobody would know who they were. They were beginning their career. We were celebrating what's about to happen. But very early on, Hosier came, before he was well known, before he was a star and a number one artist in America, which he is for most of this year. And so when we ask him to come back, when he has arrived at a certain plateau of his career, he says yes. So the way in which our thing unfolded was sort of organic in a way, is that, Damien Rice became quite a big star. Glenn Hansard went on to win an Oscar. Hosier became an enormous star. Amy Winehouse.
So you're spotting talent here.
Yes,
You're bringing in
yes.
young artists, emerging artists, and then suddenly they grow and flourish.
Yes, and I mean, it's almost like as if you would say in the record business or in the music business, it's almost an untold A&R function, that we identify artists. We know, because Molly is in the artistic community and so am I, we know that, there's somebody interesting. Say Little Sims came to Dingle, must be 8 years ago, and she played an absolutely storming gig. But very few people knew who Little Sims was. Now she's on all the Coldplay shows, does a main stage at Glastonbury, etc. So, our job really is I suppose, talent spotting to some degree, having a sense of somebody who might be on their way somewhere. And then if we ask them some years later to come back, they come back. And then other stars sort of say to each other when they're on tour, have you done that thing in Dingle yet? We were there last year. It was absolutely fantastic. So it's that word of mouth piece, I suppose, like a piece of, if you're selling something, people sort of say, that's really good, that is.
I mean, it's also just because I suppose with time, like anything, the longer you're in that business, the easier it becomes in terms of word of mouth. So a lot of the kind of the agents, bookers, managers, record labels, because we've been doing this a long time, they might say, that might work for you this year. Or like in any given year, we have our list of artists that we've probably been trying to book for 5 years. And every once in a while, one will come good, like Kate Tempest last year. We'd been on the hunt to get Kate to Dingle because we knew it would be so special for years. And so there's an artist that I'm too superstitious to name that we will get them back, but it takes years. You just have to keep asking.
I'm sure they never forget coming.
No, they certainly don't.
Once you get them to Dingle, a lot of your work is done, and they will likely come back. But it's the ones who have never been that you have to, sometimes, depending on the artist, you have to work to get them there. So it's kind of a mix. I think it has built up, hopefully, a very credible reputation. So I'll go into meetings in London and various record labels or management companies, and someone will go, I was in Dingle with Mount Kimby 4 years ago. How are you guys doing? I'm working with these artists now. What do you think? And it's kind of a natural ecosystem. And so you build up these relationships over time.
That's right. And then from a presenter's point of view as well, I mean, Annie Mack and Hugh Stevens, are really wonderful, and we've known them for so long. And they presented the Mercury Prize for the BBC this year, and Hugh is a staple DJ on Six Music now. So we're sort of in the life, if you like. We're in the life of music as it unfolds and develops. And sometimes you're ahead of the curve. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 people who are just about to arrive. And that's a great feeling as well.
This reminds me of that expression, every overnight success takes about 20 years.
We're bang on.
It's a cumulative sort of equity and appreciation of what you do. And that sort of performing in the church is so unique for the artist as well, as you were saying, Philip.
That's
the
right.
sort of experience for them is
That's right.
There's a nice kind of equity to it because the church is very small, and the way the artists get into what the sacristy room is, the side room with all the gear in it, and it's where they walk onto stage. They have to walk up a step ladder through a window that opens. And there is only one way in, it doesn't matter.
And one way out.
And there's
it can't
only
be $2,000 then.
Yeah, no, so unfortunately, that's the only way in. So
Amy Winehouse went up those steps.
Yeah.
And with her little spindly legs and her beehive hairdo.
Oh, you got good insurance.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So she crept in that way. So there is... Yeah.
Everyone kind of comes in the same way, no matter where they are. And I think they feel that. And it encourages, our artists themselves hanging out. They'll watch each other's shows. They'll say hello. Some of them might have been on the road on the same festival circuit. So there's a nice... We don't really like the kind of red tape, VIP exclusive, whatever. Like there's no other room that you should be getting into, if you know what I mean.
You may have seen Catherine Finch, the great Welsh harper, and Ethan Ivrian, the Irish fiddle player. We put them together in Cardigan, and they've grown into a real musical item. And we've been doing that for 4 years now, and we'll do it for the next 3, hopefully. And that initiative, so more and more people are beginning to come. So it's becoming something that might take hold and might endure. And again, we found the right people who are very motivated to want to go to work at the production value level that we're talking about. And again, I can't stress that enough. That's a key magnet for artists to want to come, that they know it's going to be okay on the night. But the Welsh experience is very enriching, and the Ireland's Edge piece, and you were there. Our Minister for Finance didn't give very much away when I tried to nail him on a couple of matters.
You had a good go.
You would have been much better at interviewing him than me. You would have got something out of him, James.
The Minister for Finance, yeah. They're always tricky customers, aren't they?
Yeah. But I mean, interestingly, I suppose, behind all that, he's a real music fan, and he's a bit anarchy. Like music-wise, like he knows the serial numbers of the records that he bought when he was young, that sort of thing. Real Minister for Finance, I'd say.
Good appointment.
They're saying a very good appointment, yeah. But I think he understands, and I think that I'm beginning to sense that whereas in Ireland for a long time we took the culture piece for granted, I think that there is definitely a sense that investment in the arts in a strategic way is something that will bear fruit. I mean, I guess in the Irish sense, and you'll see this from looking across the Irish Sea, that in terms of foreign direct investment, in terms of corporation tax, the results have just been released. It's just there's a real bump in the amount of corporation tax. There's a sort of a sense that...
At a much lower rate, I might say, than in the UK.
That's right. Well,
which is interesting. So Ireland is collecting
15%.
a large amount of corporation tax at 15%.
Yes, but I mean, what Pascal Donoghue, that particular minister, will say, and the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform as well, and the government as a whole, is that they're beginning to sort of sense, I think, that again, the culture piece can be hugely attractive to a workforce that want and can work in Ireland. Now, there are huge problems to do with housing and many other things, but there is that definite sense that being able to live and work and have an educated workforce and that the culture in the broadest sense is a prime and significant attractor to businesses that want to set up and can set up and can get the workforces that they need to be able to do the job.
So, Molly, you run a parallel event with Other Voices, which is called Ireland's Edge, which is like a conference. And you bring together science and art, is that right? What's the thinking here?
Yeah, so we run that with my sister Juno and my mother Nuala. And we call it our idea strand of Other Voices, in terms of it's where we go to figure ourselves out in the broadest sense. The idea with Ireland's Edge is that it kind of collapses these boundaries between different sectors that tend to be quite siloed. So kind of inserting the A of art into the STEM, like STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths. They don't tend to necessarily talk to artists, and artists don't tend to necessarily talk to, say, engineers. And the idea is that Ireland's Edge becomes a kind of a home to discuss the broadest topics. So it could be foreign policy issues, it could be disinformation, it could be AI, it could be the environment, it could be preserving the Irish language, a huge array of conversations. The idea is that the people in the room are from the most kind of disparate backgrounds. And the idea is that in order for us to imagine a better future for ourselves, we have to become kind of profoundly collaborative. And in terms of the challenges that we face are profound in terms of so many, particularly in Ireland, housing. But yeah, the idea is that we bring these people together who may never meet. And I suppose the idea was born out of a lot of questions and conversations we had around the dinner table about these kind of pressing issues that really were preoccupying us as a family, and amongst our broader friends who work on Ireland's Edge. And we kind of said, well, why don't we do something about that? Or why don't we try and talk to some experts or some very interesting people who can illuminate us or show us a path forward. And that's been going for quite a number of years now. And we've had some amazing conversations there, including, we had Fiona Hill with us last year, who's kind of the foremost expert on Russia and Russian foreign policy, serving under Trump and Obama.
And now she's back here.
And now she's back here.
In the administration here in the Department of Defense.
I think that's very interesting, and I like the idea. I mean, we're all looking for an edge, aren't we, in a way, in life? And that people listening to this will be looking for what they can learn and take home. And your fusion of STEM with arts and becoming STEAM, it reminded me of that wonderful book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance,
sure,
which I read many years ago as an enthusiastic motorcyclist. I love the journey. I like the wind in my hair. I like the smell of the trees in the street.
Yeah. But
you have to be able to fix it. And you have to be able to work, understand the engine and how it's all put together. And
that's right.
And that's what that book was really about. The sort of the journey combined with the understanding of how to fix it. And that's what you've sort of created here as well, I think.
We've attempted to do that. And to have an open forum, really. And where interesting people like, broadcasting, say, for example, is going through a hugely difficult phase right now. And the guy who's heading up our public service broadcaster, Kevin Backhurst, used to run Ofcom here. And he's faced with a huge challenge. But the historian Dermot Ferreter, who has just written a magnificent new book on the last 20 years of Irish history, with 30 years, the 90s to the present day, is going to sit down and interview him and talk to him. And that will be a very, very insightful conversation, about what is the role of a public service broadcaster now. I mean, some people would argue that there's no role for a public service broadcaster, whatever,
They certainly are in England, they're arguing that.
Yes. But I mean, I think that, again, if we talk about the broader picture of that a safe, democratic place to live, you must have a source of truth in the news that you can trust.
So my last question, and this is one of my interview questions from 101 in the book,
right.
One of the fateful 15, as it's described, as a classic interview question, and I'm asking all my guests, and I'll start with you again, Molly, is where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Hopefully in Ireland. I live in London at the moment, and I've been here for nearly 9 years, and I am slowly moving my way home. I mean, I would hope that I'd be in Dingle, but I'll settle for Dublin. But yeah, I mean, doing the same job that I'm doing now. But hopefully back in Ireland, yeah, I miss it, I have to say. Starting to really pull me home.
5 years' time, well, I would hope that Other Voices will be secure and growing and developing in the capable hands of Molly and the Other Voices family in our little musical world. And the music business is an enormously lucrative business. The corner of the field that we occupy, there's a great phrase in West Kerry in Irish called Cúne an Ghuria. And Cúne is the word for corner, and Ghuria is a hare, right? So it's called the Hare's Corner. And I asked once, I said, what is this thing called the Hare's? What is this thing? And they said, well, the farmer goes into the field at harvest time, and the one farmer will mow the whole field down, everything, every corner, everything, and take it away. And then he said there's the farmer who will leave the Hare's Corner, right? And because the hare sits, the hare doesn't burrow, and the farmer will leave that little piece for the hare just because it's the right thing to do. And again, people in Ireland referring to the Hare's Corner talk about places like West Kerry, talk about places in Donegal. They talk about these places that are left for their own sake, to nourish us, to inspire us, and that they're there for their own sake. That if you were doing a granular spreadsheet or thing, you'd be saying, how much is that Hare's Corner there? We should cut that. Well, but it will reward you in a different way, is what I'm saying. And that sometimes it's just necessary to leave that thing. And we operate in that corner. That is the place that we operate in, with people who live in that particular place, who, because they love it and feel it, want the thing to endure and to continue, that you don't open cast mine the resource, that you consistently put something back in. And if there was any one thing, again, at the core of the Other Voices South Wind Blows thing, it's that. Is it possible to put something back and to be privileged to be allowed to do that?
How do you say that again in the Hare's Corner in Irish?
Cúne an Ghuria.
That's our message, I think. Thank you so much, both of you. I love that. I think everyone should have a Hare's Corner. Thank you to Molly and Philip for joining me on All About Business. If you'd like to find out more about Other Voices, visit othervoices.ie or follow them on social media. I'm your host, James Reed, Chairman and CEO of Reed, a recruitment and philanthropy company. If you're looking to land a job you love in the creative sector, visit our website or speak to one of our specialist recruiters today. All the links are in the show notes. See you next time.